Once you start, don't stop. I told you that was what my therapist told me. Are you paying attention? Write it all out, he said. Write everything out to cope. If you have to, fill in the blanks. Make it a flowing narrative. Inhabit the bodies of those who've taken from you. See what they saw. Feel what they felt. Then you'll have an idea of how everything fits together. A few pieces will always be missing, but you'll finally be able to rest. I wrote everything out from their point of view. Some of you were confused and didn't understand. That's okay, because now it's my turn. It's time to line up the dots. It's time to tip that first domino. What happened to my friends and me over the span of 6 years in elementary school is the final piece to this puzzle. At the end of the series, there won't be a Kickstarter. There won't be any begging. This isn't a money grab. There's no gold at the end of this rainbow. My story will shine in this one place for a brief period of time. Then it will sink below all the new incoming life as it begins to rot, just as it should. Another body added to the pile. My name's Christopher Bloodworth. And this is my story. Let's get this over with. My twin sister's name was Abby. Fraternal, not identical. Abby and I met Jonah the first day of kindergarten. In a class full of squirming 6-year-olds, he stuck out in the only way a kid that young could. Jonah was quiet. He was still. Our teacher, Mrs. Williams, sat us in alphabetical order. Abby sat to my left, Jonah sat to my right. I liked Jonah. I liked that he was so calm when so many of the others in our class ran around screaming. 3 of us became friends over the following weeks. Jonah spent a lot of time at our house. We played Banjo-Kazooie and Mario Kart 64. Abby fit riding with Jonah and me because she was a tomboy. One Friday, right when Jonah wasn't over, Abby and I realized that we'd never seen where Jonah lived. We had no idea what his house looked like, but we roughly knew where it was. Jonah had mentioned the street he lived on before and had drawn his house in class, so Abby and I thought we could find it easily enough. We got permission from our parents and headed out. He lived only 4 blocks away, and we lived in a gated community, so we never really worried about danger. We set out the next morning. At that age, everything is an adventure. We thought of ourselves as treasure hunters. When we got to a street, Abby and I pretended to be the detective versions of Pip and Pop from Bear in the Big Blue House.
It can't be that house. Jonah would have mentioned columns in the front,
Abby said. I nodded. It can't be that one either, because it has a gravel sidewalk, and Jonah always talked about jumping his bike off the paved walkway that went from his front door to the mailbox. Abby pointed to a front yard.
Doesn't that look like his bike?
Yeah. Let's see if that's his place. Abby and I walked up to his front door. We were excited. We'd both solved the mystery and found hidden treasure. It was a pretty big moment in our young lives. Abby rang the doorbell.
Who is it?
A shrill woman's voice screamed from inside. Abby and I looked at each other. I saw the fear in her face and was sure that she saw the same on mine.
Should we leave?
Abby began, but the door whipped open. I could still remember the way wind sucked into that house, rustling my hair. It was like the house was smelling me. A woman with a shriveled face and a frown stared down at us.
Who the fuck are you?
I'll never forget the way the woman said you. It came out of her mouth like a bubble of pus. She pronounced the word as you. Abby was the one that spoke. I was frozen in place and staring at the woman in the doorway. Something about her face seemed off. Something was wrong with it.
Hi, ma'am,
Abby said.
Where sorry to bother you. We were wondering if Jonah could come out and play.
The woman's eyes narrowed.
Jonah?
She spat the word out like it tasted foul.
What do you want with Jonah?
Abby got a look of confusion on her face then. I didn't blame her. I was confused too. See, our parents taught us to be polite when we asked other parents if their kids could come out and play. Abby said the exact words that we were taught to use. The woman's reaction was more than her brains could process.
We just wanted to know if you could come out and play,
Abby said. The woman laughed through her nose. Something strange happened. The middle of her face shifted. My mouth fell open. The woman looked at me and laughed through her nose again. Once again, the middle of her face moved. It was only a little, but enough to be noticeable. She turned and screamed into the house.
Jonah, you got a queer and a slut out here to see ya!
The woman didn't bother to look back at us. She just walked off into the house, leaving the front door wide open and us standing there on the porch. Abby and I looked at each other, dumbfounded. We turned back when the woman screamed at us from within the depths of the house.
Get in here and close that fucking door! You're letting out all my good AC!
Abby and I looked at the same time and scampered into the dark house. Abby shut the door behind us and, eyes wide, we both looked around. Darkness weighed down on us, as did the stench of cigarette smoke. All of the blinds covering the windows were closed. No light shone.
What do we do?
Abby asked. I don't know, I said, looking around and trying to see anything in the darkness. That was when I heard it. Slow intake of breath from behind us. The sound of someone breathing in through a clogged nasal cavity. Hello? I asked, not turning around. The hairs in the back of my neck stood up.
Did you hear that?
Abby whispered. Hear what?
Breathing.
No, I said, lying more to myself than to my sister. Maybe we should leave.
Should we?
Abby asked. I felt her hand slip into my own, and she answered her own question.
Yeah, let's go.
Wait! Jonah's voice said from somewhere to our right. I jumped at his voice. I'm sure Abby did too, because she squeezed my hand half to death. Light flared to our right. It shone in the darkness and illuminated the foyer. Its sudden brightness also blinded me. I squinched my eyes shut, then cracked them open a little to look around. There was a large mirror mounted to the wall in front of us. Yellowing wallpaper curled on either side of the mirror. Hey, Jonah, I said, looking in the direction of the light. Abby squeezed my hand again.
Look!
I looked at her and she nodded her chin towards the mirror. I looked at the mirror and saw that Jonah's mom now stood directly behind us. She stood completely still and watched. She didn't say a word, but kept making that wheezing sound. Come on, guys, Jonah said. He angled the light down to the ground. Several roaches scurried away. I could have sworn I saw the leathery blur of a rat's tail slip off, but I'm sure that was my imagination. I returned to follow the lights, but I had to look back at the mirror. I wish I'd never done that. Jonah's mother was staring straight into my eyes and smiling. Her eyes were wide, cracks that almost looked like gills flared open on either side of her nose. It was almost like she opened 2 extra mouths on her face. Abby jerked my hand and we followed Jonah. We walked through a room filled with piles of magazines and newspapers, and then we were at Jonah's room. All I could make out in this room was a beanbag chair, a closet door, and a mattress that sat on the ground, strewn with sheets.
Can we turn on a light?
Abby asked.
Can we turn on a light?
Jonah's mom screamed from behind us. Cold, bony fingers clamped down on my shoulders.
Shine the light over here, son.
Jonah flicked the light from the ceiling to his mother's face. I still thought that there was something wrong with her face, something that I couldn't quite make out. Her nose and surrounding skin looked fake.
You come here to sneer at me and mine, boy?
Jonah's mom asked. The smell of cigarettes and something like moldy fruit puffed out from her mouth. There was a darker smell beneath it, though. A base note of rot and infection. No ma'am, I said, shaking my head side to side to emphasize the point. Judge not lest ye be judged. I don't know where it came from or what made me say it, but that's what slipped out of my panicked mouth. As soon as it was out, I knew that I'd made a mistake. Jonah's mom's head snapped back like I spat in her face.
Let me teach you about the cloth,
she said. I noticed that she was missing 4 of her upper teeth, and then I saw how much I hadn't noticed. Holding onto my shoulder with one hand, Jonah's mother reached up with the other hand and pinched her nose shut, like a little kid would in reaction to a bad smell. Only, she didn't stop there. She brought the fingers pinching her nose away from her skull, and a huge chunk from the middle of her face lifted away from the rest. She dropped the hand holding the prosthetic to her side, and I stared into a black abyss. The smell of rot intensified when she let out a sigh of relaxation. The hole in the middle of her face looked like one of those tall, narrow caves you see in the sides of a cliff. It split her upper lip in half and extended upwards from there, branching out a little on either cheek and above her brow. The tissue on the inside reflected back light. It was wet, and there were little flecks of black speckled across the gleaming tissues of the exposed sinus.
If,
she said, only it came out as if because she'd removed part of her prosthetic upper palate. Her lip was split in half, and she licked both sides before continuing. All of her words slurred and lisped together, making it hard to put together what she was saying.
This is what happens when you trust in the cloth. The cloth fucks you!
I didn't know what to do, so I stood there, trying not to gag as tears rolled down my cheeks.
You see this hole?
She tapped the prosthetic against her left cheek. Where her nose should have been were 2 holes, the left one much larger than the right.
He fucked me right in the nose after he cut it off. Spurted into my sinuses. Said I was cleansed.
She nodded that like I had agreed with her. I hadn't moved since she grabbed me.
You ever look down on me? Or tell anyone about this? I'll suck your face. After that, I'll shove my hand up your ass and make you talk like a ventriloquist dummy. You got that?
I didn't know what fucking was, but I understood that she would hurt me if I ever told.
Good,
she said, letting me go and turning away into the darkness. I fell to the ground and cried. Abby came over and gave me a hug. Jonah just sat on his bed. I hugged my sister, and from the corner of my eye, I saw the beanbag chair in the corner of Jonah's room surge with life and roll over. Jonah looked at me and sighed. Oh, Mom puts my dog in there when I'm bad. That day at Jonah's house changed me. Now you know why I have problems with mirrors. Every time I looked into a mirror, I know I'd see her just over my shoulder, face cracking open in a huge grin. Every time I heard the sound of the wind blowing in the night or a heater kicking on in the dark bedroom, what I really heard was Jonah's mother breathing through the abyss, and her face next to me.